Hey guys, kinggath here with another patch for Sim Settlements. This is patch 4.0.2, which I'm calling Planning for War. So this is a patch for Sim Settlements, Conqueror, and there's also a 1.1.2 patch of Workshop Framework. So be sure to grab all three. It's very important that you have them all installed. Otherwise, you're going to end up having problems. Now, Conqueror will warn you if you fail to install one of those. If that happens, you're going to want to exit your game without saving over your current game and update those other two. So it's important with every patch of Conqueror that you have all of the mods updated because the code is shared between those three different mods, as all of the frameworks are either in Sim Settlements or Workshop Framework itself, and then Conqueror is mostly just assets and the raid code. All right, so this patch is a very exciting one because it's laying down the foundation for the Builder's Toolkit to allow people to create their own faction packs. So to prepare for that, I had to do a lot of rewriting of the code in order to make it a little more agnostic and less specific to the Raider gang. And part of that, we needed an interface so that not everybody who wanted to build a faction pack would have to go build a whole quest line or a character like Jammer. So we've essentially taken all of the functionality that Jammer offers in some of his dialogue options, and we put it into the War Planner's desk, which you see in front of me. And that can be built in the same menu that the City Planner's desk can build, but it's going to handle everything related to raids and running your little army of people. So this has a few things right now, and we'll be adding more over time to add more functionality, but you'll notice the familiar settlement flag that's also on the City Planner's desk does the same thing. But then we've got three options that are specific to the War Planner's desk. So the first one is the raid board. So when you click on coordinate raids, it'll take a moment and it's going to calculate how many troops you have in all of your different outposts. Once it's done with that, it's also going to be calculating whether or not you can run an assault. And if you can't, this button that says start new assault will be replaced with the reason that you can't start a new assault. So it might be that you've already got one running, or that you don't have enough troops, or that there are no targets in range, something like that. So it'll give you a message right there telling you why you can't. Then when you hit start new assault, you'll choose the type you want. Now these are named a little more generically, not super raidery themed like Jammer's dialogue might. So establish outpost and establish vassal should be obvious, but then establish outpost and take captives. If you're playing as the raiders, that's the equivalent of setting up a slaver outpost. So other factions will have the option to do that as well, except it won't be with slave collars. Then that we'll get into once we have some faction packs released, and I'll probably do a video to go with the toolkit update to explain that to some of those people who want to get in on that. But we'll talk about that in a moment. So after you choose one of these, you will get the same options you would with Jammer's dialogue, where you choose the location and then the number of people you want to run on the attack with you. So essentially, this just is a way to replace Jammer. So you can use it with the Raider gang once you've got that quest to that point. But in the future, this is how you will use the faction packs once we start seeing some of those released. So then the ham radio, this is where you would manage your recruitment. So this is where you can donate caps or resources. And because we figure each faction will have a different type of thing that it values. So for the raiders, it's chems and alcohol. And now as of this patch, you can also donate packs and cartons of cigarettes. We figure that each faction will value different things, and that will be up to the faction pack creator to decide. So you'll be able to use what types of resources to get a little message to remind you of what sort of things you should donate to them to encourage more recruitment. And then lastly, we've got this Manage Outposts map. Now, because I'm in my main base right now, the only option I have is to change the main base to a different one of my outposts. So the main base is very important, especially for the Jammer or the Raider quest line that we have here, because it's used to do a lot of triggers. So your main base doesn't have a lot of functionality that's specific to it yet, but that will be changing in a future patch. So just get used to having one of your settlements flagged, or one of your outposts flagged as your main base, and that one cannot be removed. That one is always going to be an outpost, so you can't dismantle it, which is something I'll show you in just a moment here. All right, so I'm going to show you a few things here because we actually get a chance to show off something, a unique thing you can do with the War Planner's desk here. So since we are in a vanilla settlement that is not converted to an outpost yet, and no one lives here, we should be able to just claim this by placing down the War Planner's desk and turn it into an outpost directly. So after you place a War Planner's desk in a settlement that is not an outpost, it's going to remind you that you need to make it an outpost. And generally, the way you have to do that is by attacking it. And that might still be the case because I have raiders set up as conquerors. And again, I'm going to be referring to a lot of stuff that will make a little more sense when we talk about the faction pack pack idea in a second here. So if you go to manage outposts here, you don't have control of the settlement, so that's because I didn't activate the workbench. Let's go do that real quick. And I have super speed cheats on right now so that I can get around quickly and show you guys all this stuff. So don't mind the crazy screen blur. All right, so when you go to manage outpost there, yeah, here we go. So you can, if it's an unowned settlement and there's no one living there, you can just claim it for the faction directly. So you can directly take any settlement you own and convert it into an outpost without having to run an attack against it. So we're going to convert this into an outpost. Now, if there were already settlers living here, we would have to do it as a normal attack. So if I go to my map now, you'll see that it is now instantly converted into an outpost. So any of the normal settlements you own, you can quickly just convert those, or you can still run the attacks. That can be more fun. But if there's no one living there, you don't have to run an attack against it. So that's one of the things you can do with the map. And then since this isn't my main base, I also have the option of dismantling an outpost. And this is something you can't do through Jammer. So this is something exclusive to the desk. And while you'll want to use that, even if you're not, if you're going to be using Jammer to do a lot of your running of your raids. And I still recommend using Jammer if you're going to play as the raider, just because he is where we will introduce a lot of new story elements and new features, and there'll be a lot more voice lines added throughout these patches. And so if you're using only the desk, you'll probably miss out on a lot of that. So you'll have three options when you do this. One is to convert this back to a settlement, which will just make it operate like a normal settlement again. And this will be useful if you decide you don't want to have one as an outpost, or in the future, as we add new features, there will be definite benefits to doing this. For example, we have a feature we've talked about before where your outposts can be attacked more frequently, or where they can eventually be taken over by enemy factions. And that stuff's way down the line still, so don't get too hyped about that. But just know that these options will make more sense later on as more mechanics are introduced. But for now, they're available in case you want to just change the way you play, or you want to RP different things. So the next two things you can do, one is an abandoned outpost, which will essentially give up the settlement, but it will leave everything intact. And then lastly is tear down an abandoned outpost, and this will actually run a scrap command on your settlement and remove all of the things you've built, as well as give up control of it. So maybe you want to abandon an outpost so you can keep running attacks against it just for fun. That's totally an option. And converting back to settlement again will be for the sake of getting the mechanics of the settlement back to normal. Now, when you do this, if you have any of your raider gang here, you will need to transfer them to one of your other settlements, and that will all be explained in pop-up messages. So that's about as much as I need to show you on the desk. So let's talk about what faction packs are going to be like. So there's a couple of ways that faction packs can happen. One is people, and this is what I anticipate will happen fairly soon after I release that builder's toolkit, is people will be able to build a faction pack very easily where they just take a lot of the vanilla assets and combine them into making a workable faction. So they'll have to set up, for example, the NPCs that act as recruits. They can set up the resources that are set up for you to recruit some of them, and they'll have to set up like objects with the names. It's very, very simple, and it's basically just filling out some forms in the creation kit. And as many of you know, I do very, very detailed tutorials, so any of you out there at all will be able to follow them and do this stuff, even if you've got zero experience with the creation kit. Though it will help if you've got a little bit of experience, because I tend to skip over some of the real basic stuff, like how to open a file in the creation kit and stuff like that. So you might want to go through the first tutorial of the creation kit basics in the builder's toolkit that's available now if you're planning on doing this faction stuff and you've never done anything with the creation kit yet. So the idea behind the faction packs is that those of you out in the community who want to take ownership of different factions, or even make entirely custom factions, or make variations on the existing factions, will be able to do so, and you can do them at whatever depth you like. So I anticipate the first few releases of factions that'll come out within days after I release that faction pack builder's toolkit is that they will just be very simple. You'll have a basic recruit that you can get for that faction. It will have the name of the faction, and you can run attacks with them, and it'll just be that. Now, what I'm hoping is that long term we see some other teams or even individuals take up the idea we're doing with Conqueror and actually having a quest behind it, and so you have some immersive reason to do it, actual character spokespeople to talk to. So that's what I'm really hoping to see long term. Also, some of the stuff that would be more of a middling route, where it might not be as involved as creating a full quest character, would be to introduce some of those skins like we have for the different buildings, things, or the totems that pop up around the settlement automatically, or overriding the soundscape. There are all sorts of things you'll be able to do with this faction pack code, and I think at first they'll be real simple, and then over time we'll see more advanced faction packs coming out to flesh out the system and make it work great for all the different vanilla factions, and hopefully some new custom factions as well, or maybe some we didn't even think about. So you guys can look forward to that. I hope to have the faction toolkit out in the next week or two. It's largely going to depend on if we find any more quirks in the code post this, after you guys get a chance to play with this, because if we find any quirks, it'll slow things down, and we'll want to get those fixed before we get that faction toolkit out. So, all right, guys, I think that's enough information on all that. Go play with the desk. Definitely talk to Jammer. We've snuck in a few new dialogue lines here and there. And other than that, guys, take care and enjoy the mods.